Welcome to this video. And in this video, for many who are non-believers in technological advancement that can control the human mind, I'm about to show you that these technologies are not new, that they've been around for well over 5 to 6 decades now. Okay? The US government would like to have you believe that these weapons don't exist, that there's no technology that can control your human mind. Well, I'm here to tell you that they are. Okay, because I, for one, has been a victim of this experimentation with these technologies. And I'm going to explain to you how they put people into these sort of programs, right? Because, for one, they know that it is illegal. Two, they know that it is non-consensual. And three, they've created ways in which that they will avoid any kind of accountability, whether it be uh, monetary, whether it be judicial. And they have developed ways in which to keep victims of these non-consensual human experimentation silent. But there are those of us who refuse to remain silent. There are those of us who have dedicated our lives to exposing what has been done and what's continued to be done to make sure that it never happens to anybody else again. So you may look at me and say, oh, he's crazy, what have you. Well, if I'm crazy, then everybody else is insane. Because, again, truth is truth. It's not subjective. We know that we all been told lies, particularly by the US government, by those within law enforcement agencies, those within security agencies. They will never tell us the truth. They will never tell you the truth. And so, in this video, again, I'm going to show you that what they say about these technologies not existing is complete false and it's a lie. And I'm also going to mention the microwave frequencies, particularly with cell phones, and how it is harmful to the human body. So when we are using this, which is a cell phone, we are actually putting our health in danger. And that's why I don't sleep with my phone next to me. I always have an earpiece in, and I keep it away from me when I'm speaking. Okay, so just a little bit of educational information, which I will include in this video. So let's begin. So we all heard about uh, the attacks on the U.S. diplomats in Cuba and China, and the FBI said that no such weapon exists. This is a report from an article from Newsweek, published the first January 10th, 2018. And it says FBI rules out Cuba sonic weapon, but U.S. fears embassy staff may have been infected with virus. It's funny how they say this, right? They don't want to acknowledge it because they know that they have also developed these sort of technology and these sort of weapons. And so, given any sort of acknowledgement, they are literally admitted if they did, right? If they give any acknowledgement to these weapons, they are admitting that they also have these weapons, because 1968. Okay, actually, before I go there, let me go down here, and it says where it says, so it said it has been more than a year since the mysterious attacks supposedly took place. Supposedly, they said, all right, which 24 American staff members and several Canadian diplomats at the American embassy in Havana reported hearing losses, cognitive issues, and difficulty sleeping. The symptoms often follow unexplained high-pitched chirping sounds allegedly heard in diplomats' home, which led U.S. investigators to suspect that a futuristic sonic weapon could be behind the supported attack. Brain abnormalities were later discovered in patients, but because they had not been tested prior to visiting Cuba, experts questioned whether the findings could be used to support the U.S. claim. The lack of answers around what caused the symptoms has emboldened critics to argue that the U.S. cannot be certain they were the result of deliberate attack. And a new report from the FBI, revealed by the Associated Press on Monday, has further fueled skepticism around the U.S. claims, alleging that there have been no evidence to support the theory of sonic waves being used to harm Americans in Havana. Again, now the FBI is saying that the FBI tested the hypothesis of air pressure waves via audible sounds, infrasounds, and ultrasounds being used to hurt Americans in Cuba, and found no evidence that this could have been the case. Now, again, denial, 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 and this is what they do. This is how they get the public to believe that these technologies doesn't exist, that these technologies don't happen. Well, we know that they do. There are a lot of us that know that they do. There are a lot of us who have been researching this for decades. Okay, and through the Freedom of Information Act, we have documentation, though they may not be from the US, okay, in terms of the development and the testing of these technologies. But we know the Russians did. And so if we know the Russians did, then we absolutely know for sure that the United States military, the CIA, have been working on these weapons also. And I'm going to show you a couple of documents which is declassified by the CIA through the Freedom of Information Act that speaks about such technology. Okay, let me all right. All right, so before I begin, also let me show you guys this. So this is a let me zoom out a bit. All right. So this is an article called "The Mind Has No Firewall." Okay, let me see if I can close this up a bit. Okay, let's see. Having a little bit of issue here. Maybe this is closed in. Let's pull that. Let me pull that in slightly. Okay. Wow. All right. Having a bit of difficulty here. Let's go. All right. I believe. Okay, this is why. That's why it's locked. All right. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Just having a little bit of difficulty here with this application. Okay, so here you have an article which is called "The Mind Has No Firewall" by Timothy L. Thomas. This is from Parameters, spring 1998, page 84 to 92. And in it, it says the human body, much like a computer, contains myriad data processors. They include, but are not limited to, the chemical electrical activity of the brain, heart, and peripheral nervous system. The signals sent from the cortex region of the brain to other parts of our body, the tiny hair cells in our inner ear that process auditory signals, and the light sensitive retina and cornea of the eyes that process visual activities. We are on the threshold of an era in which these data processes of the human body may be manipulated or debilitated. Examples of unplanned attack on the body's data processing capability are well documented. Strobe lights have been known to cause epileptic seizure. Not long ago in Japan, children watching television cartoon were subjected to pulsating lights that caused seizure in some and made others very sick. Defending friendly and targeting adversary data processing capabilities of the body appears to be an area of weakness in the U.S. approach to information warfare theory, a theory orientated heavily towards system data processing and designated to attain information dominance on the battlefield, or so it would appear from information in the open, unclassified press. This US shortcoming may be a serious one, since the capabilities to alter the data processing system of the body already exist. A recent edition of US News and World Report highlighted several of these wonder weapons, acoustic, microwave lasers, and note that scientists are searching the electromagnetic and sonic spectrum for wavelength that can affect human behavior. A recent Russian military article offered a slightly different slant on the problem, declaring that humanity stands on the brink of a psychotronic war, with the mind and body as the focus. That article discussed Russian and international attempts to control the psychophysical condition of man and his decision making process by the use of VHF generators, noiseless cassettes, and other technologies. An entire new arsenal of weapons based on devices designed to introduce subliminal messages or to alter the body psychological and data processing capabilities may be used to incapacitate individuals. These weapons aim to control or alter the psyche or the attack or to attack the various sensory and data processing system of the human organism. Okay? In both cases, the goal is to confuse or destroy the signal that normally keeps the body in equilibrium. Okay, so that was from again an article, and it was called "The Mind Has No Firewall." Now let's go back. This is a book. This is a former CIA scientist. His name is Dr. Jose Delgado, and he did various experimentation in terms of on people, animals. In one of his famous videos that you can find on YouTube, if you Google it, is where he attached electrodes into the brain of a bull, and the bull was in a ring with a matador, and every time the bull charged the matador, Dr. Delgado will press a button on the remote control and will stop the bull from charging. Okay, so I just want to read a couple of excerpts. All right, and again, this book was written in 1968, I believe, 68, 69. All right, and let me go to page 3, which is right here. So, physical control of the mind by direct manipulation of the brain is a novel event in man history. In this 41st volume, in World Perspective, Dr. Jose M.R. Delgado described his pioneering work in implanting electrodes into the brains of cats, monkeys, and men. He shows how, by electrically stimulation of specific cerebral structure, movements can be induced by radio command. Hostility may appear or disappear. Social hierarchy can be modified. Sexual behavior may be changed. and memory, emotions, and the thinking process may be influenced by remote control. Direct non-sensory communication between brains and computers has already been accomplished. Okay. Now, again, this book was written in 1968. All right. And with the aid of miniaturized circumtaneous instrument, messages have been sent to neuronal structures through the intact skin. These discoveries have made have these discoveries have medical, psychological, sociological, and philosophical and physiological uh, implications. The knowledge of brain physiology thus gained can give man more command over himself and his civilization. A development to be welcome. A development to be welcome since awareness is our best defense against manipulation. The mind is no longer unreachable and may be the subject of experimental investigation. Okay? We need to reorientate the aims of civilization to restore a balance between its physical and psychological evolution. Okay, so in his book, okay, as stated, he was able to change the sexual orientation of people, not through surgery or anything like that, but through subliminal messages sent to a person's brain, affecting their cognition, affecting their desires, their wants, their needs. And they can turn off your heterosexual preference and change it to a homosexual preference. But again, people do not want to believe in these things. People do not want to understand these things. And when you see, particularly within the black community, the rise in homosexuality, lesbianism, you have to understand that a lot of it is done through these technologies. And also a big part of it is through the um, trauma that people in poor communities face every single day. Okay? So we have to understand this. We have to recognize it and stop pretending that these things don't exist. Because sooner or later, okay, sooner or later, we're going to be in serious trouble. Okay, let me close this up. Let's take that off and close that up here. So again, let's so you guys can see for yourself. He says here, it says by electrically stimulation of specific cerebral structure, movements can be introduced by radio command. Hostility may appear or disappear. Social hierarchy can be modified. Sexual behavior may be changed, and memory, emotions, and the thinking process may be influenced by remote control. Okay, and again, this was in the late 60s. This was written. Okay, so these technologies is nothing new. But because we are ignorant to technology, we are ignorant to want to know anything, they would have us believe that these things are just only in the movies. Okay, let's go take it even further. Okay, here is documentation where this is a declassified for approval for release 2012. This is from August 2nd, 1976. Okay, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just want to read this specific area here where it says microwave radiation, to borrow a phrase, is not healthy for children and other living things, including State Department employees in Moscow. Right? Because what happened in 1968, again, the U.S. The CIA did a sweep of the American embassy, and they picked up on a signal. Okay, and they kept it on the hush. They the State Department employees because they wanted to study what the Russians were doing. They knew that the Russians were microwaving their employees. Okay? And for 10 years, they let it happen. And what happened? The U.S. Embassy employees, some of them got cancer, some of them suffered neurological damage, as well as psychological issues, psychological damage. Okay? So, let me just read it. Mr. Koch asked and was given permission to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend his remarks that included extraneous matter. Mr. Koch, Mr. Speaker, an article appeared in July 27 New York Times confirming the existence of tests conducted for 18 months. And it was actually longer than that. It wasn't just 18 months. During 1967 to 68 to detect genetic damage on State Department employees who worked in Moscow during the 1960s. The reason for the test, kept secret from the employees, was to determine the effect of microwave radiation beam at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. Dr. Cecil B. Jackson, who oversaw the analysis of the State Department test sample by a laboratory at George Washington University, said of the results, "Things are never really conclusive." That bothers me. It bothers me that this radiation, which has been going on in excess of 15 years, continues in the absence of conclusive evidence. Statistics shows that radiation is harmful to one's health, yet the State Department does not care enough about its staff, about the health of its employees, to call for an immediate halt to such radiation. I am calling for that halt. Adding to the outrage is the fact that the State Department allowed the radiation to continue while testing is being done. Certainly, the fact of testing revealed a real doubt as to the effect of radiation. As a member of the Foreign Appropriation Subcommittee, I have seen a lack of concern by the State Department for human rights around the world. Chile and Uruguay, a good example. And why I deplore that, I am more distressed and angry that we would permit the same lack of concern to be evidence towards American citizens who happen to be our employee. Okay? What has the State Department done? Indeed, very little. Time magazine reported in March that radiation had decreased in recent months from previous high and that it was not halted. A member of my staff called the State Department yesterday to check on the current situation. The officer he spoke to stated that extensive discussion has taken place over the past month with Russian authorities, and radiation have been reduced to a significant level. That does not satisfy me. Having introduced 2 bills dealing with excessive X-ray exposure, I'm familiar with this subject. Experts have conceded that there is no established threshold in which radiation exposure is not harmful. Okay, so I'm not going to go into this, but it also talks about rumored illnesses that the diplomats were having, right? And their families, recall suffering strange ailments. But it says during their tenure in Moscow, ranging from eye tics and headaches to heavy menstrual flows. Some point out that former ambassador to Moscow Charles Bolin and Llewellyn Thomas both died of cancer within the last 2 years. Okay, so when they want to make you think or believe that these technologies don't exist, these things don't happen, and they come out and say there's no such thing that happened, and they deny the existence of such weapons, we know that's not true. We know that these technology actually exists. Okay, so here's another declassified document, and in here when they talk about psychiatry, and this is where us as those who are being experimented on today in modern times today, the use of psychiatry plays a pivotal role in covering up these types of abuse and experimentation. Okay, so talks about institutional psychiatry has become an instrument of civilian control of the modern state. Mind control police tactics have completely replaced the criminal justice system in the Soviet Union. Behind the Iron Curtains, where intolerable conditions would otherwise spark revolt, psychiatric techniques have turned the Soviet population into a herd of terrified and apathetic autonomans. With high technology, Soviet mind control employed against political dissidents to silence them permanently. In the United States, the mental health industry have been operating for many years on Soviet type plans to replace the American justice system with mind control operations. And there they talk about the Moscow signal. Again, protected by the general public unwillingness to believe that such things can actually happen, Soviet forces have been beaming invisible microwave radiation at Americans for more than 20 years, mysteriously triggering cancer, heart problems, cataract, and emotional stress. Okay? So he talks about how in 1962, while sweeping the embassy for bugs, American security personnel detect a microwave beam aimed straight at the American embassy. Okay? And again, the CIA launched a project codenamed Pandora, which has aimed to understand the Soviet motive for the microwave attack. Okay, now let's go down here. Um, and let's talk about the Eugene wavelength, right? Again, this was a powerful radio signal that may have affected human health has been monitored for several Eugene locations and in the air 3,000 feet above the city. Proclaimed the Eugene Register Guard on March 26, 1978. The source of the radio signal is unknown. Okay, so let's talk about this. He note in some of the stuff it says shortly after the Register printed a story, a middle-aged Eugene man named Walter Depolsky came down with symptoms remarkably similar to those attributed to microwave sickness. He noted a strange vibration emanating from within his home. He heard voices. He could not sleep. He suffered burning of his cornea. University of Oregon industrial hygienist Marshall Van Erck, called upon to investigate the Polsky complaints, found that he suffered from the same symptoms while in the man's home. Disturbed, Van Erck recruited several local engineers to investigate the engineering measure of unusual radio signal, which they determined to be capable of producing potential biohazard. Okay, and these things. This is here in the United States, right? That they were testing these things out. Okay, so we know these things. Though, like I said, though we may not have any proof because the U.S. what the U.S. has been working on is highly classified, and they're not going to release these documents. They will not. But we can make a summation, and we can surmise that since the Soviets were working on these things, that the United States were definitely working on it. And we also, I just showed you Dr. Jose Delgado, his book, and again, he was a CIA scientist. Okay, he was funded by the CIA. His research. And then here is the Woodpecker signal again in 1976. All right. So let's talk about. Let me scroll down here. Um, and let's see here. All right. So I don't know if you guys ever heard about the HOP project, which is the high. It's called the High Aurora Area Research Project. If I'm saying that correctly, I'm not quite sure, but talks about the Earth ionosphere oscillated at approximately the same frequency as the human brainwave, making it the perfect carrier off of which electromagnetic radiation in the brain wave range can be bounced without any change of frequency. The relationship between the electromagnetic magnetic sphere, I'm not saying that correctly, and the electromagnetic basis of the human body can be exploited as a strategic weapon. Okay, everyone has experienced mental and emotional shift during changes in the weather. Imagine the power open to those who, by flicking a switch, could control the Earth's ionosphere and change not only the weather but the brain waves of entire population. Both the US and Soviet government know that a strong pattern exists correlating geographical phenomena and political disturbance, health, and mood swings. For these reasons, the woodpecker signal alarmed the U.S. agency's intelligence community. Okay, and this is the book for this is from the book called Operation Mind Control. Right, which I do have that book in PDF form. You guys, can Google it. Hopefully, it's still available. It's documented things in there that many people again don't want to believe. Okay, let's go to my next declassified documentation directly from the CIA. Okay, U.S. explored Russian mind control technology. Washington, the U.S. government is perfecting mind control technology developed in the 1970s that could be used to hone fighting capabilities of friendly forces while demoralizing and disabling opposing troops. Okay, known as acoustic psychocorrection. The capability to control minds and alter behavior for civilians and soldiers may soon be shared with U.S. military, medical, and political officers, according to U.S. and Russian sources. The sources say the Russian government, in the spirit of improved U.S.-Russian relationship, is beginning to lift the veil of secrecy surrounding the technologies. The Russian capability demonstrated in a series of laboratory experiments dating back to the mid-1970s could be used to suppress riots, control dissidents, demoralize, or disable opposing forces to enhance the performance of friendly special operation team, sources says. Pioneered by the government-funded Department of Psychocorrection at the Moscow Medical Academy, acoustic psychocorrection involved the transmission of specific commands via static or white noise band into the human subconscious without upsetting their intellectual functions. Experts said laboratory demonstrations have shown encouraging results after exposure of less than 1 minute. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think that they have stopped with these type of experimentation? Okay? Answer honestly with yourself. Given the history of this country and its security agencies and its military in terms of experimentation, non-consensual human experimentation done on individuals in this country. Okay? Let's go. When people want to doubt and want to call you crazy, like I said, I don't speak about anything that I can't show documentation for. Okay, I don't pull nothing out of the air and say this and this and this. I do the research and I document it, not because of my own experience in this program being implanted for the purpose of remote neural monitoring and the use of a coercive persuasion program to label, to discredit, to destroy. See, they think that I wouldn't come forward and speak about what's happening. And this was their mistake. Okay? So, again, here's another article about that. And let's go. There's another article I wanted to read. And here we go. All right. So this is the FBI now. Right. Again, this is a declassified DoD intelligence agencies look at Russian mind control technology claims. Again, this is released 2003. Okay. As a matter of fact, this article was written by the Defense Electronic, July 1993. Okay. So, federal law enforcement officials consider testing a Russian scientist's acoustic mind control device on cultist David Koresh a few weeks before the fiery flagration conflagration that killed the Branch Davidian leader and more than 70 of his followers in Waco, Texas, Defense Electronic has learned. In a series of closed meetings beginning March 17 in suburban Northern Virginia with Dr. Igor Smirnov of the Russian Medical Academy, FBI officials were briefed on the Russian decade-long research on a computerized electronic acoustic device allegedly capable of implanting thoughts in a person's mind without the person being aware of the thought. It was suggested to use by other federal officials, which they bring in the FBI, which was looking for a viable option to deal with Koresh, said the source who participated in the Smirnoff meeting. So again, um, they may want to say they have reasons for putting people like me into these sort of programs, but I want you guys to think about it really hard. Okay? I want you to think really, really hard. Right? How did they get and select people to put into this program? We know from history that they can choose anybody. But then again, Dr. Peter Bragan, he talks about this, about how they would take civil rights leaders, bring them to the psychiatric hospital, and brainwash them to change their mentality so that they wouldn't fight against the state. Okay? I mean, I can go on and on in my theory, but I'm not. I'm just providing you with the documentation that I've researched and I've found, and make you guys think for a minute. All right, here's another declassified. This is the Defense Intelligence Agency, Control Offensive Behavior. Here says, it talks about, the Russian technologies. All right, and there is, where it talks about synthetic telepathy. Okay. So it said, we carried out extensive and until now completely unreported investigation under the Stalin regime. Today, the American Navy is testing telepathy on their atomic submarine. Soviet scientists conducted a great many successful telepathy tests over a quarter of a century ago. It is urgent that we throw off our prejudice. We must again plunge into the exploration of this vital field. Okay, so when we talk about synthetic telepathy, this is nothing new. This is nothing new. And so when people, want to doubt us as TIs, we want to say that we're crazy. So imagine the painstaking process that they will go through to cover this up, to discredit the victims, right? To try to say that they're criminals by using these technologies against the minds of individuals who they selected to be into these programs, to manipulate them. And again, you don't know because you're not hearing somebody else's voice. This is your own inner voice. Okay. And then what they do with the microchip, right? The microchip is for the coding, right, of these signals from the brain so that you will understand the message. Okay, and that you will, whatever response that you give in your mind, they're able to receive that on their end. Okay. Now, I can do hours and hours of video about my experience in this, right? And sometimes you guys see me do a video and I talk about when something's happening in front of me, I'll say what words come into my mind, right? Usually I don't really pay attention to it, but sometimes just to show an example, I would do that because I understand what was done to me. I understand what was done to a lot of us as TIs. Okay, I've been studying this for over 15 years now, using my own experience. Right? Watching my family as we're being microwaved, how they can turn them to target me. Synchronization comes out. I come out of my bedroom, go to the bathroom, 2 o'clock in the morning. My nephew's son comes out the living room at the exact same time, stands in the hallway with his phone in his hand. I come out the bathroom, he's still there. I go into my bedroom, he goes back into the living room. Happens many times. I would get up in the morning. I would get up multiple times during the night, sometimes every hour, at exactly 32 minutes past the hour. All right. I was in the car one morning waiting for parking, right? Waiting for the street sweeper had passed, and I parked the car, and I'm waiting because for 10 o'clock, I had to be at work for 10, but I thought I was going to be late because I had to get parking. And I put my phone on the seat between my lap, right? I was on my laptop, just typing up something. I put my phone to my lap. I looked up. It was a guy riding a bike, flashed a flashlight in my face. I looked back down. Okay. I looked at the time. 15 minutes had passed by, and I didn't even realize that. When I got up, went to get my phone was missing. It was gone. On my way uh, to work, I stopped by. It was a T-Mobile. I had T-Mobile at the time. I stopped by T-Mobile by the train station, and it was like the people that worked there knew I was going to come in there to get a new phone because they knew what had happened. I've had so many of those experiences. Okay, and again, people are being fooled, right? Because they have to label you, the TI, as the bad guy in order for them to get away with what they're doing, in order to not be held accountable. And you can't. And if you believe a single word that they say, you're a fool. You're a fool. Okay. All right. So let's talk about how they use this technology with the coercive persuasion program. Okay. We're gonna talk about that. So, what is brainwashing? Coercive persuasion technique, and how does brainwashing work? Now they don't have to put you in a lab and sit you down and brainwash you. They can do it in the real world, in real time, as you're sleeping, as you're awake, right? And they use the technology along with visualization because, again, you're conditioned a certain way, right? Your condition, particularly using dark NLP, which includes anchors and triggers, in a negative way. Okay, so brainwashing is the subject of many movies and documentary, like the one about communists in Vietnam who brainwash U.S. soldiers. However, the process isn't always as dramatic as it seems in the movie. You may understand the concept of brainwashing better if you call it coercive persuasion, and that's just a new way of sanitizing it. Okay, because again, when they're trying to hide something, they will always downplay it. Like for example, when they say, nobody can hypnotize you to do what is morally against your core belief, right? And we know that's not true. Okay, we know for a fact that that is not true. So don't listen to the lies. Do your own research. There's plenty of documentation that shows you, even declassified documentation. It talks about the CIA when they were experimenting with hypnosis. Talks about a man who committed murder. Right, this man committed murder, and uh, when they were um, and they had a doctor look at him and realized that this man had been hypnotized and was brainwashed, and they end up charging the person hypnotized him with the murder. Okay, so these things certainly do exist. Don't be fooled thinking that they don't. Okay, so coercive persuasion means influencing someone through the use of force. This type of persuasion is stronger and invasive. Sects, totalitarian states, terrorist organization, and kidnappers, among others, use this type of persuasion. But not just that. Law enforcement uses it when people uh, uh, um, admit the crime they didn't commit, which is called uh, false coercion. Okay, we've seen law enforcement uses psychological manipulation to get people to admit to crimes that they did not commit. And yet no one seemed to think that there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? So, brainwashing someone or using coercive persuasion isn't simple. You have to use different techniques to get someone to actually change their belief system through process and the way they feel and act. These coercive persuasion techniques can be divided into 4 types: social environment, environmental, cognitive, and those that induce disassociated states or dissociative states. Social environmental technique, these kinds of techniques manipulate or control the subject's surroundings or environment. So for example, if you like your computer, they will hack into your computer, your television, your smart TV, they will hack into your smart TV. Just as when I look at TV and there's certain things that comes up, I have my computer hooked up to my television, and if I'm watching something on YouTube and a word may come up, they'll be honking their horn because they're listening and monitoring what I do on my computer. Okay, so these things are real. People might wanna they will label you as crazy or such and such, but don't believe it. Do the research yourself. Understand what's happening and what's taking place, and understand also too that religious organizations, right, who have members who belong to law enforcement agencies, who belong in the security agencies, the military, all these things, right? So this is like a huge uh, uh, I don't want to say secret society, but a huge cult. I would say I would use the word cult because they are destructive. Okay, and they are destructive cults. Okay, so it says, right, the goal is to weaken the individual resistance in order to make them easier to persuade them. Some of the social, environmental, coercive persuasion techniques are isolation. Right, this makes it easier for the subject to be persuaded. That's why when we become isolated as TIs, when we go out there and we start to live life a little, they start coming, attacking us in a very heavy-handed psychological way, and so we become isolated. Then is when you start to see how it is that they will try to control you, how they will try to um, subject you to uh, demeaning uh, emotions, right, or negative emotions, I should say, and other things, right? So isolation, this makes it easier for the subject to be persuaded. It consists of closing the subject off from the world mentally, socially, and physically, and in other words, completely isolating the individual. Information control. The control and manipulation of information constitute a form of isolation. With less information, the subject won't have as many options to choose from. Their critical thinking will also be limited. This is what is called the dumbing down. This is what they do to society, period. Right? To dumb down the society, what do? You hide information. You don't let them access information, so therefore they're not able to think critically, because we all know that to think critically you need to read information, right, to understand what's going on around the world. Create a sense of existential dependency. This is making someone believe that their existence depends on someone else. Usually that someone is a kind of leader. In practice, this means satisfying someone's primary and secondary needs until there is a total dependency. For example, with me, when I first became targeted, my manager, whenever he would call me to explain a job that I got to work on, he would do like a hand signal, right? And when he does the hand signal, uh, the word friend would pop up in my mind all the time. I'm just like, why, why, what's going on? But again, I didn't understand. You would never really understand, right? Until, now I do though. Okay, psychophysical debilitation. This kind of physical debilitation associated with psychological debilitation that in turn leads to weakened ability to resist persuasion techniques. Emotional techniques, emotions, motivations are emotionally conditioned consequences. If you can influence people's emotions, you can influence their motivations and their behavior. Emotional activation of pleasure. This consists of charming people or treating them well. People use it to draw people in and grab their attention. Emotional activation of fear, guilt, and anxiety. Using rewards and punishment, I've talked about that many times, to get emotional response of fear, guilt, and anxiety. This is the constant threat that they do of me losing my disability. Like, for example, when I went back to uh, renew my disability and I had to do the x-ray again, I got a letter from them saying that, well, we feel that your disability will heal itself, the next time you have to come in for a reevaluation. And I'm just like, okay, again, using those sort of things, right? And I have the letter. I kept all those things. These are document things that I needed to keep. All right. Cognitive techniques. Uh, so let me finish read that. So it says, so emotional activation of fear, guilt, and anxiety, using reward and punishment to get emotional response of fear, guilt, and anxiety. These emotions encourage dependency and submission. Cognitive techniques. These kinds of techniques draw from the two we already discussed. An individual who is physically weak and feels guilty is in a perfect position to be brainwashed. Okay, disintegrating of critical thinking. The perpetrator shows the individual the invalidity of their own thoughts. Thus, every time they think something, they end up repressing it. Use of deceit and lies, very important. Distorting reality by hiding information, lying, and deceiving. Demanding submission, establishing the idea of group thought, demanding that the individual submits to that group, to what the groups decide. In other words, developing conformity and submission. Group identity. Identity has to be collective. As a result, individual loses their personality and takes on group identity. This can make individual lose their distinguishing characteristics. Control and attention, manipulating what takes up someone's attention means that you can also force them to pay attention to the persuasive attempts. Control over language. Controlling language is a way of limiting freedom. Omitting certain words or phrase is one way to avoid particular questions or evaluations. Changing the source of authority. Once you tear down a person's principle of authority, you expose them to the totalitarian authority. Consequently, this authority figures gains all the power everyone else has to submit. Okay, and so yes, all right. So, cognitive persuasion techniques that induce dissociative states. Dissociation corresponds to trance state that arise when experience is intensified, and I've had this experience many times. These states lead to a momentary loss of consciousness and identity. They are more common in totalitarian environments. These states of consciousness also make followers more vulnerable. As a result, it is easy to control them by limiting their option and reducing their ability to evaluate them. Excuse me. Coercive persuasion or brainwashing is when you manipulate someone's environment to weaken their cognitive and emotional. Persuasion change the way they think and feel, and in turn leads them to trance states that makes them easier to persuade. Okay, right? So again, I do this because I want people to really understand and truly know what's going on and how they use these things. They use the technology, they use the persuasion programs, and they use stalking groups, right? So whether it be through a religious organization in which they get their members, whether they use spreading rumors and propaganda, all these things. So that, as I said, we must understand that these things are real. And a lot of times when feel we feel a certain anger towards someone that we don't even know, we have to ask ourselves why. Why? And what is the purpose of these rumors and these propaganda? And if a person has committed any sort of crime, have you, why is it that they're not being, no one is coming from any sort of law enforcement agencies, anything like that, but in fact they go around spreading rumors and propaganda? You got to ask yourself why. This is how they destroy leaders. This is how they destroy those that they fear. This is how they destroy those that are dissidents, the opposition. And this is what they do. And particularly, I'm speaking to us as Black people, right? These technologies are being used on us. If you look at our current condition, if you look at our mental state in terms of ignoring what we see around us as a whole, as a group of people, right? You have to be concerned. You have to be concerned. And so, I receive threats every day about exposing what's happening, the destruction of my relationship with my significant other, with my kids, all this stuff, as uh, punishment for speaking out, right? Punishment for saying, hey, I'm not going to take this. I am going to expose what's going on. Let me put back on my webcam, and yeah, so exposing these things, because again, it is important. It is vitally important. Now, I may be targeted for the rest of my life, which is fine. Which I've accepted that, and but I know that it's bigger than me. That I know that whatever sacrifice that I make, right, is to make sure that this doesn't happen to other people, right? So that there isn't a next generation of TIs. There isn't the next generation of TIs who get fed up of being targeted, who go out there and hurt other people because they don't understand what's truly going on, right? And we have to understand that in this country, these things happen all the time. They may try to say whatever excuses they may in terms of putting people in these sort of programs, but you got to ask yourself, right? If that's the case, why is it so secretive? Or why is it in the psychological realm, right? So understand that. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. And again, the documentation, you guys can find them online. Okay. So I'll see you guys on the next video.